All
right. Thank you, everybody, for joining this week's BadAss Branding Presents blog talk radio show. And here again, we're doing a live video show. This time, we're doing it via Skype. So I like trying out different things. And I really thank Peter for helping me with this process and trying to get in the recording and everything going. Peter and I met through LinkedIn, actually. We've never met. And so that is the power of social media and of LinkedIn. Oh, y'all know I'm a big fan of that. So first off, Peter, tell us about a little bit. I mean, I know about you. What I really think is really one of the cool things about you is that you're an American, but you're a Japanese branding strategist. How on earth did that happen?
Wow, yeah, that's a great question. Well, to make a long story short, I first moved to Japan back in 1992, just on a whim. I had some friends who were working there, and was kind of at that crossroads in my life where I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And my friend said, "Hey, why don't you come to Japan and teach? You can teach, make a little bit of money, pay off your student loans." And so I decided to do that, and that was my first trip. That turned into a 7-year trip, and I actually wound up really getting into my field, which was first education, and then transitioned to cross-cultural consulting and training, and then eventually working for one of the largest American companies in Japan, Procter and Gamble. And then I moved back to the States for almost 10 years. And then 4 years ago, I returned to Japan with my family. My wife is actually Japanese. I was married in Japan. And we moved back to Japan 4 years ago. And at that time, I was just kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I got a corporate job, and a few years of doing that, I was working for a really traditional Japanese company, and bottom line was I actually really wasn't happy, and I kind of decided, well, hey, what do I want to do? And I went through personal branding for myself because I wanted to brand myself, and I realized this would be something that I could actually do in Japan. I mean, branding, personal branding in Japan is very, very new. And so I realized, hey, I could actually be like the guy, the pioneer of personal branding in Japan, and that's how I've essentially branded myself. There's really no one in the country who's doing this, and so it's kind of nice uh, in that sense, but it's challenging because it is such a new concept. But being kind of on that I just like to say kind of the cutting edge in the sense of bringing something that's a little bit foreign, let's say, to the Japanese culture and making it work for Japanese has been really exciting. So that's essentially the long and short of how I ended up in Japan.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm an evacuee of corporate America. And so I totally understand about, you can only do that for so long. And those that work in corporate America, God bless you. We need you there as well. But for some of us, that's just not for us. And so
Right.
I totally understand on that. Now you mentioned about Japanese not having a brand for themselves personally, correct?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's just I think in Japan because Japanese are educated to really fit in. It's an important
Mm-hmm.
part of the Japanese culture and the values in Japan is really not to stand out. You really want to be part of the group. You want to fit in, and that's been the way it is for years. I mean, even my daughter, who's she's 8 now, and she goes to a Japanese school, and you can just kind of see where the foundations of that really starts. It really starts at a very young age. But what's
Mm-hmm.
beginning to happen, and this is why I really jumped into bringing personal branding to Japan, is that even Japanese are realizing if you want to be successful globally, you need to stand out. You need to have something that separates you from other people. And so the challenge is how do you do that? How do you bring that into a culture that really values fitting in, so that people can really stand out and be unique?
Right. Tell us the difference between, in your opinion, branding, identity, and image,
Hmm. In Japan, or just in my sense?
or just as a whole, in the personal branding aspect.
Well, I think, for me, and I'll kind of tie it in back to Japan, because when I started getting into personal branding here and I was doing a little bit of market research on it, a lot of people kind of confuse branding with image, in the sense that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I need to create an image of something or somebody that I wish I could be, or what have you. And so, even here in Japan, if if you look at online, if you type in Google personal branding in the Japanese language, you'll see, consultants who say they do personal branding, but when you really look at what they're doing, it's mainly image building. It's kind of trying to build an image of something that maybe, you're not. So you're not really tapping into that authenticity, so to speak. So to me, that's what branding is. It's really using what's authentic to you, and then essentially enabling you to be more successful in your life and in your career. In terms of identity, I mean, I kind of maybe see identity as part of branding. I mean, your identity is your brand, so to speak, and I like to think about that in terms of your online identity and how do you brand yourself online, and I like to use identity more in that sense there. But I see branding and identity really the same, but it's the image piece that is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is we have a certain image of people, and when we see them kind of outside their so-called brand, it kind of throws us off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So
exactly.
I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he said that there was something, I think it was on Facebook, that someone had posted a picture of the lead singer of Metallica in cutoffs, khakis, kind of a regular old polo shirt, and he had an Armani shopping bag. I think he was with his kids, and it was just like, okay, yeah, he's an everyday person, but he was so totally out of his brand of being a metallic headbanger, but that's, that's part of his image, but it wasn't really so-called within his brand. So tell me a little bit about Mythbusters. It's one of those that I don't miss very often. Tell us some of the myths about personal branding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a big part of what I'm doing now in Japan is really just educating people what personal branding is. And I often talk about this in interviews that people interview with me. They're curious about, well, what are some of these myths in Japan? And I always get a two-part reaction when I work with Japanese. They find out about what personal branding is, and they think, wow, that's so cool, that's really awesome, I need to do that. And then it's always followed by, but I'm Japanese, and Japanese can't brand themselves because, we're Japanese. And then there's usually, after that, they kind of explain one of a handful of myths that I come across. And so like one myth that is very common here in Japan is this idea that if I do personal branding, that I have to give up my group identity. And as I mentioned before, that's such an important part of the Japanese cultural sense, where, you're part of a group. Japanese are really put the group interest ahead of themselves. And so what I have to do in terms of that Mythbusters idea is really tell them that, well, actually personal branding isn't about kind of making yourself stand. It isn't about showing off, so to speak. You're not trying to make yourself better than the group, but actually by bringing your personal brand into your group and your organization or your team, you're actually helping to achieve the team goal. And when the group really sees that your authentic value actually contributes to the overall group, that actually it really leads to higher success as well. And so I think it's really kind of breaking down one of those myths that I think is really important. And another one, another myth that I've started to bust in Japan is this idea that if you work really hard, in Japan there's a sense, well, if I work really hard, I'm going to be rewarded anyway. So I don't really need to develop a brand and really stand out. And that myth is being busted just simply in the sense that when you look at the economy, even in Japan, the lifetime employment, the sense of having that job for 30 years and getting that gold watch when you retire, I mean, that's pretty much gone. I think I mentioned to you before that, in Japan may be the one of the final countries where the shoe is dropping in terms of lifetime employment, but it is happening all over the place. And so, I have to really tell people that you can't just sit around and expect that because you're going to work hard, you're going to be recognized and you're going to get that promotion. Now you have to really differentiate and separate yourself, especially in a global environment. And I think that that's really where the young Japanese are actually seeing that. They know that when they graduate from university, they don't want that lifetime job. I mean, they know they're entering an economy where that is gone. It's not there anymore. So those are two of the myths that I'm busting in Japan right now.
That's good. You touched on just a little bit about how we kind of feel a lot of times personal branding means tooting your own horn, kind of patting yourself on the back and going, hey, look at me, ain't I awesome?
Right.
That could be part of your personal brand, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you have to do in order to have a personal brand.
Right, right, yeah. And I think actually, what we really want to do in personal branding is, eventually you want other people to be touting who you are. One of my mentors, at Reach Personal Branding, William Arruda, always says that, personal branding is not about, tooting your own horn. It's about letting other people's tout, who you are. And that's really what it is, because if you can get more people to talk about you, to really get your brand out there, that's really critical. And I think that's such an important part about what personal branding is. It's building that community and getting others to say, hey, this person is somebody that you need to be following, or you need to be connecting with.
Mm-hmm.
So.
One of my favorite words is authentic. And you mentioned that earlier about your personal brand being a true, authentic part of you, not so much something you're trying to create that's a different image. So how important, and how do you create, and how do you use your authenticity to create your brand?
Well, it's like, one of the first lessons that we often tell people is that, every single one of us has a personal brand, and that's really the power of personal branding. We're starting from, an equal playing field, in the sense that we all have a brand. We just don't really know what it is, and so we need to kind of get that feedback and ask others what they think of us, because, we may not be really sure what our authentic value is. And I've found that once people are able to get that feedback from those who know them well, they really begin to see, oh yeah, that is me. That's how I see myself, and that's how I want others to see me. But at the same time, sometimes, we might see ourselves one way, and then other people might see us another way. And so we have to ask ourselves, if the way that I see myself is really important and authentic to me, am I not expressing that on a regular and daily basis? Am I trying to kind of hide it in a way because maybe I think this isn't really appropriate, or this is not really who I want other people to be? So for example, somebody their brand might be all about being funny and humorous, but when they go into the office every day, they turn that off because they feel that, well, I can't bring that authenticity into the workplace. But actually, if you were, yeah, exactly. And if you actually were to bring that into the workplace, you might find that being more authentic in that sense is actually going to be more productive and more valuable for you.
Right, right. Well, I think one of the things, I'm more involved in business branding than personal branding. However, I've done a lot of my own personal branding in order to brand myself. And one thing that I do is my branding online. How does personal branding differ being out, and about in the corporate world to online?
Well, I think you really have to make it the same. Whatever your brand is, when you know what your brand is and you're very clear about what it is, then you want to be expressing that online as much as you can. You want to be able to keep it very consistent. We always talk about the 3 C's of personal branding, which is clarity, consistency, and constancy. And you need to clearly and consistently and constantly express whatever your brand is, both offline and online. So whether you have that LinkedIn profile, or you're on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever, you need to keep that online identity very consistent and very clear, because you don't want to, obviously, you're not one person online and one person offline. Now, at the same time, there are people who have an online identity that they choose to be very separate from their offline identity, and that's a very different, a different objective, so to speak. But really, I think that's what it is. It's really keeping it very clear, consistent, and constant, even online.
Yeah, because it can confuse people. And they're like, well, I thought they were that way at a networking group, and now I see their website, or I see a tweet, or I see something on Facebook, and it's completely different. It confuses you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to have consistency.
Yeah, it's very important. And I think sometimes what I've, to bring it back to Japan, the interesting thing in Japan is that until recently, social media and using social media has always been very anonymous for Japanese users. Japanese users culturally prefer to be anonymous when they go online. And so one of the other barriers that I need to break down in Japan is, as you do personal branding, you need to be able to really be present online. Use your name online, use your picture online, because often what the Japanese users will do is they'll have kind of like an anonymous nickname that they use on their Twitter account or whatever. But, obviously now with
Right.
Facebook and LinkedIn requiring the real name policies,
Yeah.
they need to do that. But so like up until about seven, even just recently, 8, 9 months ago, Facebook was doing horrible in Japan because Japanese didn't want to jump on and use their real names. Now they're starting to see how the power of Facebook, and what it can do for you, and the same as LinkedIn. And now
Hmm.
it's starting to grow, and the user rate has started to skyrocket in the last year because of that. But before that, yeah, everybody was anonymous online here.
What changes do you see coming up now, even within the next year?
Well, I think one of the big changes that I see is that LinkedIn is going to really take off in Japan. It's it's still relatively new. LinkedIn set up their offices in Tokyo last fall in October, and they've enabled the Japanese language as part of the LinkedIn profiles. Japanese are still not really sure how to use LinkedIn, so one of the services that I provide is actually training people to use LinkedIn to demonstrate their personal brand. But I really see it taking off because Japan doesn't really have any other kind of business related social network, and the power of LinkedIn is really beginning to show itself in Japan. So I would say that's going to be a big change, and then hopefully I'm anticipating that because of the work that I'm doing, that I'm going to be having a lot of Japanese out there branding themselves and being more successful globally with their personal brands and standing out more than they have in the past.
Awesome. Well, one of my favorite parts about branding and business is the difference between men and women in
Right.
business. So tell me a little bit more about personal branding, what a woman should or shouldn't do versus what a man can sometimes get away with.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a good question. Even I'm finding that most of my clients, even in Japan, tend to be women, um, and I think that from that perspective, um, you know, maybe there's a couple of reasons here. I think women seem to be more willing to grasp personal branding than perhaps men are. I mean, I think there seems to be that sense. And in Japan, one of the key reasons is because women are seeing this as a way of actually advancing in the workplace. Culturally as well, it's very much a male-dominated business
Right.
world, and so women are seeing personal branding as a way of being more of having more opportunities and actually getting into global businesses and global companies that would provide them the opportunities that they may not get elsewhere. But I would say that for me, anybody, whether you're a man or a woman, I mean, you need to approach personal branding very actively and proactively, but at the same time, just be very careful with how you present yourself, especially on social media. I mean, I think nowadays it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, that. I mean, anything can just go viral in seconds, and some silly comment that you make, or some reference that you make, or mistakenly thinking you're sending a direct message to your best friend, but it's going out to the entire Twitter sphere. I mean, so I think that it really it's just a thing that we all have to be concerned about. That there are standards within. I think there are certain standards within branding yourself online that no matter who you are, you need to follow. But I think from a workplace standpoint, I'm finding that for me, a lot more women are jumping onto personal branding. I think a lot faster than maybe men are as well. And maybe in the sense that I don't know, maybe if you see this as well, is there more of a sense of pride, I guess, for guys? But I don't know. I mean, I'm just seeing that for me, at least in Japan, women are definitely embracing it more so than men are.
I agree because I think, like you said, business is primarily a man's world.
Right.
And so, as a woman, we almost have to feel like we are obligated and almost have to push a little bit more than what a man would.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, I still, even though this is 2012, I think that's still a little biased in that way. But on that same point, I think women are kind of busting the mold open a little bit to where like, okay, my business is badass branding. Well, you wouldn't think that being a woman-owned business because it's badass, right?
Right.
That's
Yes.
almost, that word itself is more associated with a guy than it is a woman. And
Right.
so,
Right.
you know, and once I tell people what, you know, there's an acronym and everything, they kind of go, oh, okay, but still, why badass? I'm like, because I can, you know,
Yes.
and that's part of my brand because I can, and that's my image and what I do with my business
Right.
with people, you know. And so I think that breaking that mold now a little bit, even in personal branding,
Right.
um, well, what I wanted to ask is kind of what and breaking out and still being authentic. What you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, in creating something that you want to be and still be consistent.
Right.
I mean, there's some steps along the way. What are some do's and don'ts? I'm saying, and both just kind of overall and online, should or shouldn't do on your branding.
Well, I think one of the first things that I always tell people is make sure you get a really great professional headshot. Have a professional headshot because that becomes your presence. Everywhere. People, they want to see who you are, and you don't want to have a photo of you hanging out with your best buds and all that, and because you really can't see who it is. But once you have that professional headshot, and then use it consistently everywhere, because that begins people begin to see who you are, and again, it's that consistent and constant message. I mean, that isn't to say that you can't get a new headshot a year later and kind of upload that, etc. But that's really one of the key things to do, I think. Another thing to do is to, if you don't have your own domain name, then you've got to go out and get it. I mean, it's just so,
Absolutely.
particularly if you can get like yourname.com, like my name, Peter Sterlacci, is very unique. I mean, there aren't too many others out there, so it's pretty easy to get my domain. But if it, just get that, because I think it's really important. You can always create something on it later. You don't have to build a site on it now. But then some people say, well, hey, I don't have time to build a site. I'm not, I don't want to get into the whole WordPress thing and all that. And then I say, well, then one of the best things you can do is get an account on what's called personal portals, about.me or flavors.me.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
These are awesome sites because they're free. It's a kind of a one-page presence for you on the web. You can use it as your website address, about.me/your name. Put that on your business card, and that becomes your place on the web. And you can
Right.
bring everybody there as well. In terms of a couple things, don'ts, as we said before, just don't. A lot of people think, well, I need to be on every single social media channel. I got to have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, a LinkedIn account, Pinterest, G+, all this stuff. I tell people,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be on every single one. I mean, pick the one or the couple that are really critical, that are going to be useful for you, and then really, use it to its fullest advantage. I'm in the business of personal branding, so I'm on all of those channels, but I find that I tend to gravitate more towards Twitter. I mean, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I spend time on the other ones too, but you don't want to get so bogged down into using all of the tools. But eventually, you get savvy enough where you can kind of cross platforms and do things on other things as well. And I think the final do in all of this is just really, be yourself in all of this. I mean, I love what you said about the badass branding, because I think by the way, I just love the name. I mean, it's just so cool. And I mean, you're being authentic to you. And if other people are kind of like taken aback by it, well, that's okay, because, those are not the people that you want to, be connecting with anyway, perhaps. And
Right.
so,
Exactly.
and that's really it. I mean, just be yourself. You're going to attract the people that you need to attract. And I think that's the power of personal branding and identifying your brand and getting it out there. You're going to attract the people that you need to connect with, and you're going to, kind of push away the folks that don't need to connect with you. And in the end, you're going to just be, I think, more successful.
I couldn't say that better myself. I think and like I said, especially when I'm more of a business brand, I still worked a lot on my personal brand and doing a lot of research on that. It is critical to just, maintain that authenticity and that consistency, and that's
Yeah.
things that goes across both the personal and business branding.
Right.
So,
Yeah. One more.
can
One.
you give us a? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, one more thing I just want to mention because we're using video right now to do this call. Get on video. I mean, I tell everybody, I mean, video is where it's at right now. I mean, whether it's your corporate branding or your personal branding, I mean, it was identified as one of the trends of personal branding last year in 2011. It's continuing this year as well. I mean, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to do an interview, try to do it on video, put it on YouTube. Start experimenting with video. There's a lot of great tools out there now. You can use your smartphones to record a quick video and just upload it directly
Mm-hmm.
to your Facebook timeline or your Twitter account, etc. But it's really that really provides that sense of trust and credibility that you need for your brand because people see who you are. They can connect with you, and it's an immediate kind of trust builder. And I think that the more you're going to start seeing just from now on, just start seeing everybody using more and more video. And you don't have to worry
Yeah.
about doing like this professionally produced video. I mean, I'm sure in this video interview right now, we've had a few little hiccups and glitches, but that's okay because that's authentic. That's who we are.
Right. Absolutely. Can you give us a little bit of a hint or clue on your TEDx project you're working on?
TEDx. Oh, I, well, I am hoping I'm actually auditioning for TEDx Kyoto in a few weeks actually, and I think the topic that I'm working on is this idea of not settling. You know, we have this idea of where we just settle for things in life, and we just kind of get comfortable in that, even though we kind of wish we could be doing something else. And so I really want to kind of focus on this idea of not settling for the things that really don't make you happy, but finding a way to really break out of that and do something that's more true to what you want to do. I mean, even in my sense, you know, walking away from a corporate job a year ago, you know, a corporate job, a salary, benefits, all this, the security that you could ever want. And I was working for a traditional Japanese company that's still very traditional and probably and definitely is still valuing lifetime employment. And I remember when I left that job and the president of the company said to me, well, why are you leaving? I'm giving you lifetime employment. And I looked at him and I said, well, because I have to. You know, I mean, I need to move on. This is not what I need to be doing. And so I often use the analogy in cycling, you know, because I'm a cyclist, that we often stay in one gear. We kind of pedal in one gear because it's comfortable, and we don't shift out of that gear. And so what I'm hoping to do in my TED Talk is really encourage people to shift out of that comfortable gear and to really kind of make a name for yourself and do something that's really cool and awesome and badass.
Right. Well, the last couple minutes, tell us how people can get in touch with you and your website and, of course, your Twitter and all like that so we can connect with you.
Great. Well, the best way is to connect with me on my website at petersterlacci.com. And on that site, you can connect with me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I also encourage people while you're there to go to my blog. I'm a very active blogger and often post regularly, so you can go to the blog and check that out and subscribe to it as well. And just send me a message. I'd love to connect.
Well, I just read your blog post earlier this morning about being unforgettable in your ethnic way. That was a great blog post.
Oh,
I really
great.
liked that one.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter. This has been terrific. I'm looking forward to keeping in touch with you,
Absolutely.
even beyond this. And I'm glad you're in the States now for a few more days?
Yeah,
visiting family?
leaving a week from tomorrow. So it's been a fun trip.
Well, we'll have to reconnect on our hours.
Absolutely.
I know it's what, 14-hour difference?
Yeah, something like that. It's
Yeah. And I'm a night owl, and so it's 11 o'clock in the morning for you when it's
perfect.
2 o'clock in the morning for me.
Perfect.
So,
Well, I'd love to
that works great.
so continue.
Thank you so much, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Super. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being on the show.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.